Nachmittags, welcome to the afternoon panel session on the topic of how to create and grow AI ecosystems. So maybe to frame the conversation a little bit and to get started, what I'm very excited about at latest with the release of ChatGPT, AI has actually made it to dinner table conversations. So that's something new. Like everybody in the room knows that AI has been around at least 10 years with the ImageNet moment, but we have never really discussed it. ImageNet was like a really big release, and since then, the big companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, they really have driven forward the development and adoption of AI. And of course, we all know that happened in the Valley. They built a very high capacity, really talented pool of people that are educated in the Valley, staying in the Valley, ready to build and productionize AI system. It's a really, really healthy ecosystem. And with the question of like how that ecosystem is very, very rich and fruitful, we have seen now recently a Cambrian explosion of AI systems in that system, making this ecosystem even richer and even faster and even more accelerating. And I want to discuss with my fellow panelists here how we actually address the challenges in the European ecosystem, where we are significantly much smaller, and how we create a healthy and innovative ecosystem here in Europe. So with me are, first of all, Dr. Klüwer. She is the director of K.I.E.Z, which is the Center for AI Entrepreneurship, a network for startup services of the Berlin Universities and the Charité. She has founded several AI companies already, has also brought them to successful exits, so has a lot of experience in this. And also is an advisor on many councils, such as the Technology Sovereignty Council of the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, as well as the Young Digital Economy of the Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Action. Next, to the right of me is Alexandra Beckstein. She's the CEO and co-founder of K.I.E.Z Ventures, a company focused on building ecosystems in the quantum and AI space. So I'm super excited to have also some quantum here on the panel. She has also worked for a lot of startups, so it brings a lot of expertise in these very young, early-stage ventures in here, and worked in the sector of renewable energies and published a book on how to be successful in shaping the future. Last but not least is also Thomas Neubert with me. He's a serial entrepreneur with a lot of expertise in building and evangelizing new innovations and markets. He's the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange and also the founder of WowDAO, a block-based AI ecosystem, and has done a lot of long lists of experiences working for various different companies on both sides of the aisle. Too long to actually mention all of them. We might get into some of them. So welcome, everyone. So to kick it off, maybe I start with you, Tina. As a core member of K.I.E.Z, you're typically dealing with two ecosystems, right? Like you're dealing with the academic ecosystem and also the startup ecosystem. And to kick us off, like, what's your experience or your impression of a healthy ecosystem? What are characteristics that are typical and common in all of these ecosystems that are healthy?
Yeah, interesting. So I have been a researcher myself, so I have been in research for almost 10 years in artificial intelligence, and then I founded a company. I dived into the whole startup ecosystem, and now I'm bringing it all together, and I think they differ quite a lot, actually. Yeah? So the academic ecosystem is quite different from the startup ecosystem from my perspective, and it felt totally different to work in both. There are some common things, but in academia, you usually are much more on your individual work. Yeah? So there's a lot happening that you do by yourself, and even if you work in a team or develop something together, there's always this individual component to it. On the other hand, in the startup ecosystem, there's a lot of collaboration, and things go super fast, and people talk to each other and exchange a lot of ideas, but you don't go so deep. Yeah? So in research, you have the ability or the scalability to come together in small groups and dig really deep into a topic, right? And you stay with that topic for some years. This is what research actually is for, right? So that you get some new insights if you stay with this topic and you can elaborate on it. On the other hand, I think what both ecosystems need to be successful is exchange. Yeah? So if there's no exchange, if you don't interact, if you don't express your ideas, if you don't get feedback from your peers, if you don't work together on a certain task, then there's no success for nobody, right? So I think that's actually the crucial thing about those ecosystems, and it's always helpful if you work together, yeah, like concrete work. It's not like something abstract. If you have groups shaping around a certain task, and then everybody does whatever they can to bring this task to success, that's always a big motivator.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe drawing on that, like, because we want to foster transfer from academic research into ventures itself. Maybe for you, Alexandra, how does venture capital actually support this? Like, how can we leverage venture, and what role does it play in actually making this transition happen and creating and bringing these ecosystems together?
So out of my experience, venture capital is a crucial part when it comes to building ecosystems. We tried without. Actually, what we do is we build a quantum ecosystem within a quantum hub that we built in Basel in Switzerland, giving access, hardware access to the industry. And startups are crucial for us to come into this ecosystem. And startups, before we had a venture fund, they came, they had a look what we do, they found it quite interesting, they connected maybe with the universities or with some corporate partners, but then they left again. Since we have this fund, everything is different, so it's really a big magnet for global startups. It's a magnet, but it's not the cause why they stay. So they get attracted by the venture capital. And what we do is, as soon as we invest, we want the startups to stay with us. So it means we give them projects with our corporate partners, that can be also globally. We give them a coaching, individual coaching, one-to-one mentoring. We give them free access to quantum and AI hardware and services around, so they can leverage their knowledge and their technology. And this is what venture capital allows us to do. So I think for me, venture capital is a very crucial part. Out of experience, I can say it's the most crucial part for us when it comes to building ecosystem. A very nice example what I have is, or what we want to reach, is one startup. They approached us, they're actually from Germany. They approached us with for venture capital, and what they will get now is we will invest in them. We are now in the process of investing. They will have mentoring. They will stay with us 5 months. And the most important for me is they already found 3 customers over our network, which whom they will work now. They will start projects now, very advanced, very good projects. And yeah, this is actually what we do and what venture capital makes possible.
So moving on to Thomas from here on, you've seen many, many ecosystems. You have also built many, many ecosystems. From your experience, like, what does it take? Like, can you give some examples? Like, how do you really get an ecosystem off the ground and scale it?
It's a good question. So first of all, being German, raised, born in Germany, I moved to Silicon Valley 32 years ago. And in my first job in Silicon Valley, I had the honor to work with somebody in the 3D graphic card industry at the time. Now I'm aging myself. And that person had an incredible talent to build an ecosystem that didn't exist at all. So think of it as there was, and this is now 25, 27 years ago, there was Silicon Graphics. I don't know if somebody remembers that company. And there was the workstation industry. And then there was the PC industry. They're 2 different industries. And this particular person, with myself, introduced a technology to bring the whole super expensive workstation industry down to a Windows workstation PC for a fraction of the cost. Now that was a technical, physical revolution, but there was no customer, no ISV, an independent software vendor industry. So how do you convince these people who are developing super expensive software for an industry that are making a lot of margins, the movie industry and whatever, and here comes this small company. We had a graphic card, we went to Microsoft, we teamed up with them, And how do you convince, the new development community to adopt this new thing where there was no revenue, no customers, no channel partners, no nothing. And the biggest thing that I learned during that time, and I replicated it multiple times over, is keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible, make it explainable, and I live by actually, I would say, two things. The first is, I don't know if anybody knows or knows the movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner. And I love that saying, if you will build, they will come. And it's really true. And the other one is, if you keep it simple, you have to simply answer the question, what's in it for ? And the question mark is every entity involved in an ecosystem. What's in it for the VC? Mm-hmm. What's in it for the entrepreneur? What's in it for the channel partner, for the developer, for the customer, for the user? If you can answer the question, what's in it for ? It's actually fairly easy to build an ecosystem. So 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to build a new ecosystem, which is now, for me at least, called the Transatlantic AI Exchange. It started as a hobby. Until 8 weeks ago, I was with Intel. I was a general manager at Intel around AI for incubation programs within Intel. So I was there for 6 years. This thing, which is now, as of 8 weeks ago, a full-time job, because since ChatGPT, everybody seems to be an expert, and everybody's talking about AI, talking about timing. If you build, they will come. Yay. But my point is, when I started this, I didn't have really a vision in specifically where I would be 2 years later, like here on stage talking at this conference about AI, and we just went through the ChatGPT. It was more about where's the need, where's the value creation, and how do you build an ecosystem around AI? And the trigger for me at the time was this paper that some of you actually know. I didn't know at the time. It was this paper called AI Made in Germany. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? We tried for 30 years to convince the Europeans to just kick the gear in startup and mindset and everything else. So at the time, I was like, I want to connect the AI experts in Silicon Valley and connect them with the knowledgeable base of AI, research institutions, universities, startups, incubation programs, and so on. So I started to create an online, dating system is the wrong word, a web session on a monthly basis, which has now grown into hybrid events in London, in Munich, in Berlin. Now I'm doing it in Düsseldorf and then back in Palo Alto. And the ecosystem has grown literally within 2 years or less from 0 to over 8,500 followers, 25 events with over 120 plus people who are really deeply experts, and they have done it for free. Nobody has ever charged for any of my sessions, and everything, please go to Transatlantic AI Exchange. All the sessions are for free. There are sessions about quantum computing, trustworthy AI, incubation programs, and what have you. So I keep it simple. What's in it for ? And you can answer it, pretty good.
I really like this answer, and there was one key phrase that resonated with me is, if you build it, they will come, right? So maybe piggybacking off of that, you've seen it with hardware investments, quantum knows it, and AI knows it as well. It's like, this are very, very costly measures to build. It's really, really capital intensive, and we also know the German and the European tech VC world is comparatively small to, say, the US and Asia Pacific. The problem is also they have more capital and they're faster. They're accelerating. They're doing a lot of stuff. So my question is maybe, how can we, first of all, to Tina, how can we catch up? Like, why should we not give up? Like, what is in it for us?
Well, yeah, I think that's a tough question, right? Of course, I hope that we will keep up, but we need to be realistic, right? So we are a comparatively small industry, and we also in Europe have a fragmentation of countries, nationalities, and language borders. So that's something that we always have to keep in mind. But still, there's hope in for us, I think, because we have also a lot of interesting findings and a lot of interesting people. Yeah, so mostly it's about people. I think we have interesting researchers, for example, here, but usually what happens quite frequently is still that they decide to leave the country, to continue their work somewhere else. And I think this is something that we need to stop. So we need to be attractive to those heads, to those talents, because this is actually what will shape the future. Yeah? So we need those young and also experienced people to come together here. And I think also what you said, I agree with all of it, but I just want to add the aspect of people as well. So from my experience, if you have this, what is in for me, that's absolutely the fundament of it, but then you also need the right people to build it up. And if you find those seed of teams that will continue and support your work, then you have a good chance. And I think this is what we need to strengthen here, and we need to strengthen the player that we have, so that they don't decide to leave us.
And may I can add to that? I really have to compliment what is going on at the moment in Germany. Many people in Silicon Valley, particularly the German community and the veterans, we were trying to pitch to the Germans, mindset. Everybody knows by now Silicon Valley is not a place, it's a mindset. And I don't go into the details why, but it is what it is. I have never seen in 30 years so much progress with the younger generation of startups, particularly in the AI space. Now, I hope this will continue, and I hope that, at least with everybody that I'm talking with, they have the right mindset, but the structure is still not there. It's still slow, it's still bureaucracy and paperwork and all of that stuff. But in general, the last 2 years, amazing what Germany is doing right now in regards to startups and entrepreneurship. So heads up.
All right, that's a really good point. Thank you so much, and bearing the torch for the German ecosystem. So I'm looking forward, and I hope that you're right, and that we keep the momentum going. To keep the momentum going, of course, we also need a lot of capital, right? Maybe to you, Alexandra, how can we create an ecosystem for the VCs where we can actually write bigger tickets, right? I have a lot of friends that want to start actually building very complicated, very capital-intensive products. They can't fund them here. Like, they go to US companies or go to Asia Pacific and to get the tickets.
Yeah, that's still correct. So in quantum technology, I know we have only 2 VC funds in whole Europe that invest in pure quantum. We are one of them, and we are new. So there was all the years only one quantum fund. In AI, we have 14 funds that invest in AI early stage until Series A. For the later stage startups, we only have 1 fund. There is only 1 fund that invests from Series C on in Europe into AI startups. And I think this is a real problem. If you ask me how we can raise bigger funds, that's a good question. I don't know. We just have to try. I think there is some challenges also we might face. So for the investors, maybe in Europe, we have to be clear about regulations. This is a risk if the investor if there is no regulations, but the regulations are about to come, so we are a bit hesitating. And a second topic also for us is IP rights. A lot of the startups come as a spin-off from university, and the patents and the IP are very often still with the university, and they are not free with the startup. This is also what we often see in Europe, and I don't think this is so much the case in the US. I think there is a huge difference. Maybe this would help to raise then bigger funds and to invest bigger tickets. But I don't have an answer to this question, how to actually raise bigger funds. But I know we have to do it.
Yeah, but it's for me puzzling sometimes that we are talking about, for example, you said the German ecosystem, or then the French ecosystem, or the Nordic ecosystem. Of course, you mentioned it, we're like very splintered. We have like cultural boundaries, we have language boundaries. Why don't we try to pool them better, right? Like, the whole European market is actually as big as the North American market. Like, what's the challenge here?
That's a cultural question, in my opinion, honestly. If I compare to the United States, when I moved to the United States, I made a joke, but I actually meant it. The United States in general is actually pretty inefficient. There's a lot of problems in the United States, don't get me wrong. But there's one advantage that they have. From East Coast to West Coast, massive amount of people, massive amount of capital, but they have one government, one language, and then some regional stuff. You can get away with a lot of mistakes if you have that giant engine behind you. Now you come over to Europe, and yes, you can say, you know, we are all one Europe. We like to be one Europe, and I think we got there for the last 20, 30 years. But the reality is, there's the French, there are the Italians, there are the Germans, and then within Germany, there are the northern part, and there's the western part, and then there's Berlin, and there's Munich. It's fragmented. I actually don't believe that there will ever be a Europe as unified as the United States. But that's not a negative. I don't want to be negative at all. It's a fact of life. It's a fact of 1,000 years of a history that United States doesn't have. So I think the question is more, how do we maximize the output of the environment that we are in? Yes, we can do it a little bit better, but the fragmentation is there, and I do not believe that it will go away anytime soon.
And it's also not just about a mindset, right? There are legal issues, tax issues. Yeah, if you cross the border, there are different ways to handle things. Yeah, so and you have to always, if you add a new country you want to sell to your product to, you have to deal with it. Yeah, always you have to find again the way to do this in this country. I mean, it can be done, but it just takes a lot of resources.
Thank you. Maybe another questions around this topic for the panelists also. What advice should we actually give to young founders in this fragmented space, right? Like you're facing really challenging regulations, which is the next topic that we're getting into. But like you're also facing a very fragmented market. You're facing problematic problems at scaling these systems because you really have to jump the regulatory fragmented market hurdle really early. You have small ticket sizes. You have all of these kind of challenges. Like, what's the advice that you would give to young founders?
Think big.
Don't give up.
Don't think regional.
Try
think big.
to collaborate. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so collaboration we have. Think big and don't give up. Okay, that's a good grid. I like that. Maybe coming to the other topic, which I already teased about regulations, right? We hear about two different things. We hear about increasing Europe's technological sovereignty and regulating AI. So there are two key concepts that are going to shape the future of the European tech system. It's not only the Germans, like all of Europe, because it's discussed at the European level. What role does our ecosystem have to play here? Like, where should we go? What's the importance, like, from the VC side, from like connecting people, from like the transatlantic perspective? What is the role that we have to play, and what is crucial for us to get right?
Well, as an ecosystem, I think we need to be the mirror of all the different aspects and positions that are to be kept in mind in that discussion. And I think I personally see the regulation as something that is really like more like a threat to the AI industry than as a win, just in the way it is just now. And I think what we can do about it is just to always make clear where we see the problems. Yeah? So what are the issues that we see from our perspectives? And if you have an ecosystem, then you should have a lot of different players included there. So for example, startups or universities or industry and bigger enterprises. And they all have a different perspective on regulation. And I think it's important as an ecosystem also to bring those together and maybe frame it, document it, and bring it to the decision makers, so that every voice can be heard.
Maybe what I experience, I'm German, but I work in Switzerland, and in Switzerland we're totally out of these regulations. And we are a very small country, and we have to open up our ecosystem is not worth anything without the global approach. And I think this is also an approach. What I see here now, there is a lot of nationalism, regionalistic thinking maybe. But if Germany, or if we here really, or Europe wants to be a leader in ethical AI, AI for good or whatever, or AI for impact or whatever you want to call it, you have to know what the others are doing. We have to try to collaborate to then also find, by collaborating, a common understanding in what we really want to reach. And I think this is the key. Try to open up, to collaborate, and not to just garden in your to do gardening in your own small garden. It's a global development. You cannot stop it. You have to develop together. That's my experience also.
Maybe that's a good point to just try to get you a little bit to argue about this, because like on the one hand you say like collaborate, right? Like we want to collaborate, we have to do collaboration in order to have ecosystems. On the other side, Thomas is involved in like trying to bridge gaps between the transatlantic collaboration. So we're talking about sovereignty, which is de facto saying like we don't want to collaborate, but we do want to collaborate, but in like a very controlled fashion, right? So where do we draw the boundaries for that?
Well, one thing is we have to collaborate, right? I mean, if you want to access a really big market all at once, then you need to collaborate and tap into the ecosystem that is available to you in North America in general. When it comes to the regulations, even I have to say, I pretty much changed my mind a few months ago. People who know me for a long time, for me, regulations and stuff was almost like, don't bother me. I'm going for the opportunity. I'm going for the technology. I'm going for the use cases. I want to build something. The rest, we will worry about it later. That, for me, is not the case anymore, I have to admit. The reason is, when I witness at the moment what's going on the European level, and the European Commission, finally, after 2.5 years of begging, they opened their first office in San Francisco. They never had a representative there. So every few weeks over the last few months, they have sessions, and normally the sessions in their office is primarily about regulations. And the podium discussion, and I went every single time I showed up physically, and I am now convinced that the Europeans, with their mindset, value-driven, honestly, data privacy and stuff like that, it is something that is of most urgency that needs to be addressed. And we should do it better than when the internet was invented, because we missed an opportunity to put some basic regulations in place. And if you look at the last 20 years, who fined Microsoft or Google for misbehavior? It wasn't the Americans, it was the Europeans, rightly so. We in America, we could care less. We just have a different mindset, right? It's more capitalism and money and return on investment. Here it's different. What I have seen over the last few months, very impressively, is the Europeans are putting a stake in the ground. Now, it's not perfect. We heard this morning. Unfortunately, there's too much effort on all the stuff that is not working, and things needs to be finalized, and paperwork and stuff. I think the balance is the right thing to do. Don't discuss things to death and the opportunity is gone because somebody will be faster. But I do believe that the Europeans have the right, and they are very well positioned right now, to put fundamental AI regulations in place and force it in a respectful way onto the Americans and anybody else if it's based on the value system that Europe has. And I think even the Americans have recognized that.
Anyone wants to chime in on that?
Still, the Europeans don't have the big cloud providers, right?
I know. Yeah. Well, you have to try.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that, of course, with the regulations come, like that, it's a topic that is regularly discussed with my friend circle in the US as well as here in Europe, is that when we're talking about regulations and we're talking about these kind of effects that regulations have, it's not only like actually potentially stifling innovation. I say potentially because it's like not necessarily true, or being like a showstopper to certain types of system, but there's also a secondary effect by discouraging people to actually try, right? Like if you're really coming out of university or you're coming out of high school and you're really excited of building a piece of technology, and then you start looking at the press and you're starting looking in like different types of political debates, and people are always talking about like, we have to regulate here, we have to mitigate this, we have to do this. Like, if I were 20, that would really discourage me to build something. How can we actually make this discourse into something positive so that we avoid either pushing people out of Europe to foster the brain drain, or even like stop them from being discouraged and not trying at all?
I think it's about the potential, right? So, but this is something that we definitely need to, in Europe, embrace a little bit better, from my perspective, so that we also talk at the same time. Then we talk about risk, we talk about the potential. And I'm getting asked a lot about the risks of AI, but I almost never get asked about the potential of AI, right? Sometimes someone asks me, can you name just one example of something you can do with AI that's actually good? Yeah? And the question itself also expresses the mindset, I would say. Yeah, so there's a lot of talking about the risks and not so much about the potential. And I think even if we make it more concrete and talk about the things that we already have, yeah, so very day-to-day things we use, we used to, we have in our smartphones, we have already built on AI, and nobody actually cares, yeah? So, and nobody also would ever want that to go away again, because it's very convenient actually to have it, yeah? And also there maybe is not a risk included. But we don't talk about those things, yeah? We always talk about the more general risks, the more general, broader questions of an artificial intelligence that sounds more like an entity that's similar to humans. And I think that's what we need to change. We need to have a different way of discussion.
So, agree. I like to compare it to a joke that I have been telling and sharing for 25 years. There's always opportunities and there's always risk. On anything, it doesn't matter what, right? So you have to accept that. But the fact is, a German entrepreneur wants to pitch the idea to a VC. There are two VCs sitting there. Someone in Silicon Valley and a German VC, or European VC, doesn't matter. The entrepreneur gives the pitch, and then there are two responses. The American VC says, no, sorry, the German VC, so the European says, why? The American VC says, why not? That little joke, there's so much truth in the fundamental mindset of the culture. That's one of the problems that we have. If we balance that opportunity versus risk, we will be in good shape. But what we have seen 25 years ago in the internet boom, in the social media 10 years later, and the cloud service providers is always we here talking about the whys, the problems, the negatives, and the United States like, let's do it. Look at Facebook, Google. I mean, there's a reason why these companies are over there. I'm not saying it's all perfect, but it is fundamental, a mind shift that needs to take place, which is already doing it, but it's not fast enough, and it's not aggressive enough.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about encouraging, in general, encouraging startups to found and that they should not be afraid of regulations and so on. So I also like to talk a lot about role models. So what I think is we should also create a more playful surrounding for startups to actually try out. We don't have a culture of failure. So like regulations, maybe what you just pictured is that a startup could be stopped by a regulation. And this is also in our culture to not even try. And I think this is also a cultural problem, what we have to tackle by creating role models, by showing more startup founders, by bringing maybe serial founders together with young startups in the universities, having another education on this. We don't have this founding culture. I think this is also what we have to work on.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I dominated the debate right now with all of my questions, but I'm sure that the audience has a lot of interesting questions to this panel. So please.
it's all set.
No
good.
questions. Like everything's here.
We
No
figured it
questions.
all
Yeah.
out. We figured it all out.
Exactly.
It's 100% clear.
Okay, so now I'm not sure if I was the first one here. But I was curious. I agree. There is a certain mind shift that needs to take place, and you mentioned it's happening. Could you maybe put a bit of a light on where it's happening and where it's happening fastest, in terms of more individuals, more investors, more company having a more risk-open mindset that comes closer to perhaps the American, globally known entrepreneurial mindset, right, of taking more risks and so on. So I wonder where there are good examples, best-in-class examples of Europeans that take that leap forward, right? Like, for the lack of a better example, and I'm not saying I'm a fan or anything of that sort, but an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs type person, right? So it would be maybe...
Yeah. So I would not necessarily look around and trying, an equivalent to Elon Musk in Germany, and I'm glad I wouldn't found an Elon Musk in Germany, to be honest with you. Yeah, exactly. But I give you an example, and I'm sticking a little bit more within the AI space. When I had the idea to do this bridge building between the two, Silicon Valley and Germany, I was not involved for 6 years when I was at Intel. I had one business trip to Germany to talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D perceptual computing, AI. I was 15 times in China. There was nothing going on here in Europe or in Germany on these topics, including robotics, to some extent robotics. So here I'm coming over, pretty fresh, open-minded for AI, and I have to say, the examples that I have is, on Monday I had an event together with other partners here in Berlin at the Merantix AI campus. At the same time, I have very good friends who helped me kickstart Transatlantic AI Exchanges, sitting right here. Ragnar is there, Petra is over there, from AI Hamburg. When I go into a Merantix office or AI campus, or anybody else, Heilbronn, Munich, wherever, these incubation facilities and the spirits of these younger entrepreneurs, I have not seen that 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. So I couldn't tell you right now like a specific startup company who already is shining and is a unicorn over the last 2 years, but it's, last 2 years, but it's more and I love working with startups. If I go into these incubator, accelerator programs, facilities, the way it actually physically looks, it's like Silicon Valley 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Maybe it's a little bit lagging behind, but the spirit and the energy and this positivity, it's inspiring. It's just awesome. So if we can maintain that and even encourage it even further, and let's not goggle them up with, government rule regulations and paperwork and stuff like that, I think you will see that there will be a massive amount of startup companies maturing into an A round, into a B round, into an MVP product in a year, 2 to 3 years from now. And I hope it keeps going. But I'm positive. Where I see a little bit of an issue is what we discussed before, is that the amount of capital that's required to get them to that next level or even one level up, that I'm concerned about. That infrastructure, that ecosystem backbone just doesn't exist at the moment.
But maybe it's also true, build it, then they come, because now the market of generative AI, it will raise, I read, in the next 10 years, every year, 27%. So this is quite huge, and I think with this market opportunity, maybe the VCs and the more money comes to invest in.
Then there are probably plenty of people in this room that need to convince the rich people in Germany who are normally more conservative, put the money not in, housing or whatever, put them into an AI ecosystem startups. That's what I would do.
Any more questions? I think I saw one back there as well, but... No?
I actually don't have a question, but I feel the need of actually trying to change or do something or act. And I think what actually still is kind of, because you mentioned mind shift, And I think in Germany especially, we have not really changed the mind yet. I mean, that means, like for instance, not drinking coffee up to like tomorrow. Stop it for like 6-7 months. Just stop, never ever touch the coffee again. And then you start really changing your mind. And I think that's what we have to do with the AI environment, because around the globe, like there are different mindsets in the globe, like America or Africa, India. I just went to the UK last year and talked to Indian people, and they are so fast and quick, especially in the supply chain. And in Germany, we discuss AI right now, but it's already here. So, and now we are changing and trying to adapt, but we have to be adaptability right now. And that's what I think, at least when I talk to people, they still feel comfortable, they feel the, I think you have to be uncomfortable to become comfortable and to work together.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So, okay, thank you.
The only constant in life is that nothing is constant, period. It's a fact of life.
So we are unfortunately running out of time now, but maybe as a final question, maybe in like 1 or 2 sentences. Rise of AI is happening each year. The space is moving extremely fast. What are you looking forward in the next 12 months? Like, what do you want to actually see happening in the next 12 months and have accomplished when you're coming back to Rise 2024? Maybe start with Tina.
Sure. I would like to see, and I'm pretty sure we will see that, many more interesting applications. Because just now we have a different way of putting more and easily and faster applications based on foundational models. And we can already see that for us, for example, in K.I.E.Z, we have new startup teams applying that use large language models as a fundament and then just build the application on that. And of course, that goes ways faster than just than training own models. And I think what we will see is a lot of new applications popping up around this and building an ecosystem actually around those technologies that are now available. And I'm pretty much looking forward to see all of those new innovative applications.
Thomas?
In 12 months, I think the first thing is I would love to see that based on the European leadership, there's going to be an AI semi-global Western world framework of regulations that is acceptable for both sides. That would be one. And then the second is parallel to that effort, which I know is huge, is I would like to come back in a year, if I'm being invited, and I want to see a massive amount of startups having risen to the surface where the Europeans or the German ecosystem can say, look, in the last 12 months, we have built, pick a number, 5 to 10 new unicorns within AI, and then balancing that with the Regulations Act, and then we are just off to the races.
All right.
Yeah, what should I say? I would like to see more connection of AI and quantum, and this in both sides. So what we see now is we have a lot of AI use cases that will be leveraged with quantum computing, as soon as quantum computing is ready to work. But also on the other side, we see now the other way that AI helps quantum to leverage. And this is a very interesting development, and I think 1 year is quite a good time span where we will have a lot of development, and hopefully we will hear something about it next year.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you all. Let's give our panelists a round of applause, and yeah, let's look forward.
Okay, so you